Willie, the blues is dead.
Pete, when you say something like that, my first reaction is that's not true. But then when you think about it, I think the better question is explain to me how it isn't.
Well, there's a lot of talk today about keeping the blues alive. You take an artist like Joe Bonamassa, for example, who's probably one of the most prominent blues artists today. He's got an organization called Keeping the Blues Alive, where he focuses on keeping the genre alive and healthy and getting into schools and teaching kids about the blues. But when you look at the blues today, most of the most notable blues artists of all time, they're not here anymore, Willie. They're dead.
They're dead. And I think also, too, we sort of agree on this. We're going to have a little bit of a disagreement at some point here, I think, in a second. But one of the things that gets to me is, yeah, the fact that Joe Bonamassa has Keeping the Blues Alive, it sort of begs the question. You have that organization because there's this fear that you think it is dying. And I honestly think it is. And I think part of the reason we can sit there and we can make a lot of excuses, we can talk about how, oh, technology has hurt the blues. It's a visceral art form. It needs a, you know what? That's all well and good. But the reason really why it's dying, I think, and I know some people are going to probably rip me for this, but I think with the exception of perhaps a Buddy Guy, I think because so many of the past generation's prominent blues artists, some of these British invasion guys, they don't give a damn, Pete. They don't give a damn if it doesn't involve them. They're less about the music. They're about me, me, me. You know, Eric Clapton releases a single. People want to talk about the societal ramifications. I want to talk about why are we talking about a mediocre single that Eric Clapton releases? Why aren't we talking about all the good music that's out there now with the younger generations? And I'll tell you why, because if it's not for a guy like Buddy Guy, no one is helping these people out.
Well, you look at Buddy Guy, and he's really the last of the kind of OG bluesmen that are out there. He's a dying breed right now. And you look at Buddy Guy, and he does so much to keep the blues alive and keep this music going for future generations. And you can tell he really feels a strong responsibility to do that. Now, PBS recently put out a documentary about Buddy Guy, and you could see that. And there are a lot of artists interviewed in that documentary who talk about the effect that Buddy Guy has had on them and his impact on this genre and pushing this genre forward. Now, Buddy Guy mentors a lot of young artists. Kingfish, for example. If it wasn't for Buddy Guy, we might not even know who Kingfish is.
Right.
He financed his first album.
Right.
You know, he took a shot on Kingfish, and now Kingfish is really blowing up as much as someone can blow up in the modern day blues world. He's mentored Quinn Sullivan. But here's the deal. You know, this art form, it's not out there. And like you said, outside of Buddy Guy, there's not really any bluesmen left from that original generation. And there's not a lot of bluesmen who are kind of pushing this forward in terms of fostering the next generation. That's where someone like Joe Bonamassa is using his platform to the best of his abilities to get more people involved in the genre. But this genre does have a very big problem. And really, in terms of the mainstream, blues is definitely dead.
Right.
Nobody listens to blues under the age of 30. For sure. Really, very, very few people. Unless you're a guitar player, you are not listening to blues.
Probably not.
Under the age of 40, dude, like people aren't listening to it.
And I'm going to go back to it. And maybe I am being too harsh because you know what? It's their lives. They've made their hundreds of millions of dollars. They can do whatever the heck they want with it. I really do believe that. But I think it's a little bit self-serving. And I think it's a little bit unfortunate because if you look at these other genres of music that have done a little bit better in the past couple of decades, I think a lot of it is because guys, men and women mentoring these younger people, taking some of that money and involving themselves in a product. Like, I don't think that this happens in the genre. Everyone wants to talk about how great classic rock was. And guess what, Pete? It's probably still my favorite genre. But here's the deal.
But classic rock radio stations are playing the same things they've played for the last 20, 30 years.
Right. It's gotten old. And then everyone wonders why, like, hey, why doesn't anyone listen to this anymore? I don't know. Because you're boring, because you don't get with the times, and because the guys, the men and the women who are supposedly, and it's mostly men in this case, who were the top of the top, the people that you want to pin your hat on and say that this is why this generation was so good, they don't do a damn thing for any of the youth. And whereas you look at other genres, people do. People in rap, people in country, they get involved with the younger generation. They set themselves aside. They're not out there writing sort of mediocre singles about, the pandemic. They're actually helping people out. And I know that's a little bit harsh on Clapton because, we have to give credit where it's due. He does the Crossroads Festival. That's a wonderful thing. Anyone who takes their time and money and effort to help people with a serious problem is great. But Pete, I don't know if you've ever been to one of these Crossroads festivals. Once again, is it a hip happening place?
Well, that's one of the things with the Crossroads Festival. First off, it's great that they are raising money for a very good cause and helping people with substance abuse problems. And that's fantastic. But when you look at the Crossroads Guitar Festival, you have some of the all-time greats there. But the fact is, these guys are not getting any younger.
Right.
They just keep getting older and older. And there's not a lot of younger artists that are really performing at Crossroads. I think you take a guy like Gary Clark Jr. Now, I will say this, Gary Clark Jr., he had his coming out party at Crossroads. It's because of Crossroads that his career really was able to take off and launch. But there's not a lot of other younger artists who are actually even performing at Crossroads. There is no Crossroads for today's stars.
No.
Crossroads features the stars of 30, 40 years ago. And it's great to see those acts get together, but you're not seeing the stars of today perform at Crossroads. There is no Crossroads for the stars of today. And how can the stars of today truly be the stars of today when nobody knows they're the stars of today?
Right. They don't. And I don't know how this actually changes because it is very endemic to rock and roll, the blues. Everyone likes to talk about it's a genre, Pete, that lives in the past. And Pete, I'll be the first person to say I'm very guilty of it. I mean, you take a look at the albums behind me, a lot of those are pretty darn old. And I think that because of the way the music is, it was easier to convey and to spread in a different era. But guess what? There's a difference between a reason and an excuse. Other genres have been able to do this. No one's saying it's going to be easy, but I think it really does start with the fact, and I know I'm harping on this, but some of these older guys, they really don't seem to care. And you know what? That's their right. But if they really cared about the music, like Buddy Guy and B.B. King did as well, because he used to mentor people, then they would maybe be out there doing a little bit more to, as Joe would say, keep the blues alive. What's going to happen? You know what? In 10 years, Pete, most of that great era that everyone loves to gush and fawn over, it's just a matter of fact, they're not going to be alive anymore. What singles are you going to listen to then when those guys are gone? Because you've done no time investing in the great music that's out there today. And it's a shame. That's all it is.
We're talking about those classic rock radio stations that literally have been playing the same songs for the past 20, 25 years. Every time you get in your car, you're going to listen to the exact same song that you would hear on that radio station 20 years ago. They're not playing anything new. No. Nothing from today is getting out there. There's just such a closed-mindedness out there in terms of this music today. And I feel really bad for a lot of these musicians playing blues today because it's really to no fault of their own. They're just never really given the opportunity or the platform to really shine. And it's really unfortunate, Willie.
Yeah, it's too bad. And I've said this on a couple occasions. We're actually going through, if you're paying attention, we're going through a mini golden era of guitar players. I can't tell you, you and I could just sit there and start listing guitar players. I'll go to a festival, I'll hear some track that someone submitted, and I'm thinking, wow, I haven't heard of this man or woman before, but it's there. And I don't know. I think what changes it really is that it's a genre that needs to get with the time. They need to get with it. Or Pete, the blues is dead.
Yeah, well, the blues is dead. I mean, Joe Bonamassa recently appeared on To Tell the Truth, which is a ABC game show. So that's nationally televised here in the United States. And the question was, who is the real blues man? These people don't even know who Joe Bonamassa is. See, that's what's crazy. When your biggest artist, Joe Bonamassa, can walk down the street and people have no idea who he is, your genre has a big problem. The blues is dead, Willie.
It is.
What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. Obviously, this is a great question because there is a lot of great blues music today. However, the genre just does not get the spotlight. So what do you think? Is the blues alive and well, or is the blues dead?